I think that's the single word benefit of master data. If somebody said, okay, you have a word, it would be scale.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TechTea podcast with Heather and Larry McLean. We've got a really great lineup for you today. We actually have a guest speaker here that we're going to talk about. Larry, you want to introduce our guest speaker?
Absolutely. I've been excited for this for a while. In the data world, in the data speaking circuit, you have a few folks who really stand out. And our guest today, who is Mr. Scott Taylor, he's been on the speaking circuit for Enterprise Data World, basically any data conference you go to, Scott will be there. Why? Because his message is very, very important. He's very entertaining, and we're extremely excited to have him here with us today.
Very lucky that he has joined our little TechTea podcast here. Okay, but before we get into that, we have to go into our little What's the Tea segment. So where we talk about something that's sort of the latest in technology news. And I think you had something you wanted to bring up, right?
Right, I do. There's the recent MIT report study that has come out basically saying 95% of generative AI projects are failing. And and since we do AI, since we specialize in AI as an emerging tech and
I don't want to hear that at all.
Yeah, but there's a reason behind it. So you have some insight. Go ahead.
So I think when you first hear that headline, of course, it's a little shocking, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" And I think we can probably talk about some of the things we know are probably going on. But I do want to say that it's really not that they're all failing. What the report talks about is how about 95% of those projects that make it to prototype are not making it to production. And I think that's a significant statistic. So maybe they're not failing, but they're not making it all the way through to be a usable capability in somebody's enterprise. So, why would that be? What do you think?
I think it comes back to there's two or three factors here. One which we've been talking about lately is your data ready for AI? Do you have the foundation created? Have you decomposed the project well enough so that you know what needs to be delivered, where and when, to include the data? Because that's going to absolutely be a failure item of your AI project if your data is not ready, prepared, and available at the time you need it. The other piece is find someone who can do this for you. The vast majority of organizations, unless you're really huge, like Walmart, Amazon, companies like that, you probably don't have AI expertise within your ranks. And you didn't hire in the people that are working for you today to do those things, right? They don't know AI. They don't have the experience. So honestly, much like a very skilled trade, bring someone in like McLean Forrester, a little plug there.
Yeah. And I think we know just from our own experience that there's a huge difference between, hey, I've put this prototype together and it's working, right? It's working on my box kind of thing. And there's a big difference between that and just kind of demonstrating that you can build that capability versus making something production ready or ready for a whole bunch of users, and it needs to be safe and secure and it needs to work really well. That there's a huge world of difference there. And I think a lot of people can do the first one, but I think not everyone can do the second one. And I think that's where your plug for bringing in somebody who does know how to do all of that is, really would save time and money for these organizations.
Absolutely. So, get the experts in, have them build it, and then we'll train you to maintain it. So completely agree.
Let's head over to our interview with Scott. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll see how that goes.
The data whisperer. Yeah, I like it. He always has these great little phrases. So let's go over. We're an emerging tech company. We are implementing AI solutions. However, you don't get far from your roots. And that comes back to any AI implementation we're looking at, any decomposition of the project. At the end, you cannot forget about, and we highlight this, is your data ready for AI? And that's really a couple presentations that I've given as speaking engagements, white papers, et cetera, is you can't forget that your data is really still the foundation, no matter what it is you want to go and do. And when we start talking about agentic AI, when we start talking about vertical generative AI, grounding all of that data on your products, your customers, your locations, all of those things that you evangelize often, becomes the foundation of any AI project. And MIT, others are telling us through their studies, Stanford just released another one. A lot of those are failing primarily because the data isn't ready.
Big news. Not
Yeah.
there. Yes. That's real, dog bites man news here for sure.
So as we're building out AI capabilities, we're absolutely grounding on, is the data ready? Is it there? Is it available? Can I make it ready? And quite often, if an organization has their data foundation, i.e. their master data especially, makes the job so much easier.
Yeah, it's this curious notion of what you put into something has an effect on what comes out of it. It's not,
you make it sound so simple, right?
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out is one good way to put it, GIGO. But, people have been banging on that cliche drum forever. And while I believe it, it's still doesn't really resonate the way it should.
How do you talk to senior leaders and sort of convince them that, or try to convince them that master data management and just managing your data is the way to go? I mean, it's a hard sell sometimes.
Yeah, it's especially when they're distracted by the, the cool, hot, sexy stuff that
right.
sounds like
some AI.
Gotta push a button.
So what do you say to them? How do you convince them?
It's a broader conversation. So it's, it comes around a couple of key themes that I always reinforce. One is focus on the why, not the how. So why is it important to whoever is listening, not how you do it? And as data people, we love to explain how we do things. And we love to explain how we tried this, and then we did that, and then we did this, and then we did that, and then we pivoted. It's like, who cares? Why is it important to the person on the other side of the desk? You need to know how to get it done once they say yes, right. But that is not what to lead with. You got to lead with why. I believe that every company, the work I do, I try to make the kind of statements I have be extensible across enterprises. And that's the space I work in. Enterprises of whatever type. All over the world. I spent 30 years in the data space, talking to every kind of company at every level of maturity and every type of enterprise all over the world. So it kind of limits my scope, I guess, a little bit. But they weren't managing data on Mars yet. But when they do, they're still going to need master data. What I came to the conclusion that every company is trying to provide value to their relationships through their brands at scale. So really very deliberately picked those words and spent a lot of time trying to make it the fewest words as possible, which is another trick I do. Why, not the how? Deliver value to your relationship through your brands at scale. Scale means technology. Technology means hardware, software, data. If you have data, you need data management. So that doesn't necessarily mean bullseye with that little riff there, but you start to take it apart. Every business has relationships. So let's dive into that. And if you're talking to a senior leader, you're talking about the types of relationships they have. Or is that important? That's almost a rhetorical question, of course. If you don't have relationships, you don't have a business. But the data about those relationships, is it well structured? Do you have a lot of duplicates? Are you having trouble with verifying different entities or contacts or whatever kind of terminology you want to use? That's where the trouble happens. And then you look at the next domain in that sentence around brands, products, services, assets, deliverables, whatever those are. How's your data on that stuff? And you're going to find somebody in the organization who knows that it's terrible, that's living a nightmare behind the scenes, and people kicking and screaming and trying to deal with,
constant remediation.
A mess of stuff, and, salespeople who just, put other in the category, and because they don't want to spend the time filling out all the forms or whatever their process is. Or you have a company that's got, this is a true story. I talked with a company, they said, well, we have 38 places we can do customer create across our organization. I go, well, there's your problem. All right, so start there,
Yeah.
Can you get that down to like a dozen? I mean, it's just, so it builds this whole issue. But the point is, focusing on kind of what the business is trying to do and how having master data, reference data, metadata, that structural stuff will enable those strategic intentions, will get the company to be able to be successful at those ideas and those objectives, even though they don't look like they're directly data related. But as data people, we know if you're talking about doing something with relationships, there's data behind it. That data probably sucks.
I'll put you back to, I like the relationships piece that you talked about, because today with AI, it's really highlighting this area because the capabilities, especially in apps and that frictionless customer exchange that's happening now, you're starting to really need more and more and more data about the who, right? And so whatever your customer wants, whatever they put in their cart and they took back out, whatever, all of these things, and you talk about the relationships, that puts like a shining star right above that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
What does this person want? What do they need? And then to tie it back into your other piece of the why, those are your outcomes. That's the way we talk about it is outputs versus outcomes. I'm
Right.
looking for outcomes, right?
Yeah. And then, that's sort of a B2C
Yeah.
scenario you're talking about where it's really hard to disambiguate, people, John Smith, John L. Smith, John Smythe, whatever, classic million examples,
Right.
different birthday, wrong zip code, or, and so trying to verify and validate those individual entities, companies have a lot of trouble because it's such a big scope, right? We're dealing with millions of these records and they're coming in from different touch points, and how do we pull that all together so we have a single view of that particular entity, which tends to be a consumer or a person, a single person.
Right.
On the other type of go-to-market approach on B2B, there's not as many, but it gets a lot more complicated because there's hierarchical relationships. There's divisions, there's ship tos, there's bill tos, there's plan tos, there's global ultimate parents, there's commercial views, there's financial views, there's legal views, there's all these different configurations. And it can be even more challenging in a lot of ways, because the effects of having that wrong could be a lot worse. If you blow your Walmart hierarchy,
yeah,
and you're a consumer packaged, you're in a lot more trouble than if you just, sent 2 coupons to the same household because you thought those were 2 different people, for 50 cents. But the essence of it is the same. That who that you talk about, Larry, who is it? How do I know this is who it is? How do I know I don't have it already? How do I know I should even deal with it?
right.
Do I search before create to know I don't create a duplicate? These simple notions that just get completely out of control when you don't have the guardrails and the processes in place to manage that data as quickly as you can get it. Not to design something, but
right.
if you don't manage it when it comes in, then when are you?
Right.
Later, downstream, when you've
right.
And as you look at, I want to create an AI capability, which is all the rave today. We're doing it, right? But if you want to create an AI capability today, to your point, all these legacy systems, and as we decompose a project to say, okay, I want this AI capability to create a frictionless customer exchange. Okay, well, how many legacy systems? As you mentioned, how many legacy systems do I have that data? Which one is the most correct? Because none of them are completely correct. So which one is the most correct? Well, now you're heading down rabbit holes with really limited ability to succeed on this project. So it comes back to, as an organization, let's define our master data, right? And as part of establishing master data, I think historically it's been a tough sell. I will tell you from my background running an enterprise data management office, it's a tough sell. I need to put this effort. I even had one senior executive at one point when I was just talking about having data stewards counter it and say, I don't see the need for that. And it was an extreme challenge. And if you can't even sell the idea of who owns this data, now how do you get to that point of, no, we need to manage it across the enterprise? So from your many speaking engagements, the feedback that you get from those, what's your recommendation to data leaders to say, how do you get in front of the C-suite and really make your case?
Start with what is important to the company, not to the data department. Right. And what's important to the company is usually published somewhere or distributed and communicated usually in very clear language. If you're a public company, it's in the annual report, it's in the investor day presentation. If you're a private company, it's at the last, town hall.
Right.
Look for those things. And the reason I say I keep going back to this phrase of providing value to relationships through brands at scale. Those objectives that companies publish They're not going to talk about data quality. They're not going to talk about data stewardship. They don't even know what master data, reference data, metadata are in most cases, but they are going to talk about brands, and they are going to talk about relationships, and they are going to talk about doing things at scale. So as a data leader, you've got to be attuned to that and translate these, inherently difficult things to understand and execute and much less explain into the enabler for what your CEO has proudly declared to the shareholders that they're going to try and execute.
Right.
And it's hard, but it's a lot easier than dealing with all that data all the time and complaining about it and not getting the job done. And so I try to inspire data leaders, data management leaders in particular, to put that story together, to realize and they have a seat at that table and should be explaining this, and don't let the AI cool kids run the shop. And use simple, try to come up with simple stuff. I don't know whether that person who dinged your data stewardship idea, but it's common for folks to just, especially on the business side, to go, well, I don't care about data stewardship. I just want great AI capabilities.
Yes.
And it's like, well,
hold on.
I don't care about the ingredients. I just want a good meal. Does that work? No, so it's really, as it's that direct of a cause and effect relationship. There's not a lot of intermediation in between of like, if you got duplicates, those are going to go all the way through your process and you're going to end up sending multiple catalogs to the same household or things like that. But I try to get away from also sort of the nickel-dimey kind of ancillary ad hoc clerical sounding benefits. Like, it's important, but it's not earth-shattering to say, we're going to reduce our mismailed catalog count by 8.7%, which will result in this much, postage saved and this much, whatever printing. And it just seems measly almost.
Right.
There's a good example too, Scott, of that I've been talking about lately. It was Starbucks, right? Starbucks across multi-systems within their enterprise to ensure that if you go to Starbucks, any place that has an app that gives you like points and things like that, when you go there and you make a purchase, you immediately want to see that show up in your account. Oh, I got another star, or now I qualify for this. Think about your mileage points and things like that. Multi-platform that information has to be shared across, because that user experience needs to be tied in across all. As soon as I walk away from Starbucks or as soon as I get off that flight, I want to see my account updated.
Right. Yeah.
And those are disparate systems and legacy systems, their own sets of data. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And the desire on the user side is intense, and and the patience they have is a lot less.
Exactly.
So, you and I probably were amazed however many decades ago that, look, it works. And now it's like, it's got to work. Why is it in here?
I'm telling you, Scott, Larry wants to see his United points show up the minute he walks off that plane.
As he's landing, I want to see the count as
he's landing.
Yeah.
I'm almost to platinum. I need that extra.
He's counting those PQPs or whatever they're called.
And the thing, it's all, much of that is doable if you've got the right.
Oh, yeah.
You start with, okay, what's our customer file? Do we have a brand file? Product file? Do we have, a location file? But
and you can kind of do that with string and baling twine and wire, i.e. tech debt and interfaces. But the easy solution, well, let me rephrase that. The easy result later, harder up front, is build out your master data.
Yeah, it's the way to start.
And share that.
If you want to do it at scale, I think that's the single word benefit of master data. If somebody said, okay, you have a word, it would be scale. That's what it does.
I love that.
Okay, so you can expand on that. That could be speed, that could be distance, that can be whatever scale has, but it means bigger and broader and more efficient, and
interoperability.
A lot of things packed into that tiny little word. And it's that accelerant. When you're trying to look for budget, it's hard to justify because it doesn't do anything on its own. It's that enabler, it's that catalyst, it's that ingredient that you've got to put into everything else. So I find people fall into these traps in terms of trying to justify the expense by looking at just master data and itself. I mean, my career was licensing master data as a service, which is what I called it, and positioning that in a business friendly way while I was at Dun & Bradstreet and while I was at Nielsen. And if I look back at my whole career, where I succeeded the most was where I was in a position of helping craft the story.
Tell us more about that story crafting. Do you have a framework that you like to use?
I use what I try to do, and it's in my book here. I might as well plug the book here. So
there you go. Yes,
telling your
please.
data storytelling for data management. It says right 99% buzzword free. They don't want to overpromise. And what came out organically, and I can back into the story too, Heather, but is this very simple framework I call the 3 V's of data storytelling for data management, kind of a knowing wink to the 3 V's of big data, but mine are vocabulary, voice, and vision. And it's just a simple way to think about it. Okay, vocabulary, get the words right. Stop using all these, buzzwords. Don't, data mesh, data fabric, data spanx, whatever you want to call it. It's like, who cares? And even words like quality.
It's nebulous.
Yeah, because it's...
all this stuff is nebulous.
And as a tangent, if talking about the importance of data quality worked, then I guarantee I would not be on this podcast today, because I wouldn't have a job, because people would have sold it in already.
Right.
But
it's kind of boring.
We've been whining about data quality, and that's what it tends to sound like, actually. It sounds a little bit whiny for decades and decades and decades. We're still in the same conversation about how do we explain it. So get the words right, get the voice right. I say harmonize your story to a common voice. Harmony doesn't mean everybody sings the same notes, but it does mean they sound good together. And does your department all understand this? Can your team leaders, no matter who the CFO called, bumped into at the company picnic and asked about what the initiative was, do they all have the same story? And does it, align together in a way? And that takes work. You've got, don't make them do it on their own. As a leader, like, here's our story, gang. When we get with business people, why not the how? Focus on what they're up, blah, blah, blah. And then finally, vision, which is ultimately why it's important. And everything we do in anything in data management, I believe, has got to enable the strategic intentions of the enterprise. Where's the company going, and why is, in this case, master data going to help you get there?
Right.
Well, and I talk about, in a recent presentation, I talked about CIO, and I'll come back to data here in a sec. CIO 1.0 versus CIO 2.0. And CIO 1.0 was always worried about cyber defense, making sure that the assets were provisioned, et cetera, et cetera. They received the strategic direction and they implemented in their swim lane. CIO 2.0 needs to be in the room, talking about emerging technology, talking about the catalysts of technology today that can actually drive not only fixing pain points, but also creating opportunities for the organization, because technology today is moving that fast, and it is that much of a differentiator for a lot of companies. I would say the same now for the CDO. And you kind of really made me think about that. Well, does the CDO need to be in the room? Yeah, because the CDO can also not just receive, but help generate the strategy to say, you know what, if we did A, B, and C, this is what we could do for our customers. If we could do F, G, and H, then this is the kind of information we can receive on our customers. And now they're part of the conversation instead of just receive.
Yeah.
Limits their ability. Agree?
Yeah. And there's probably some, confusion, as there would be, and it's all our fault, about like CDO data, CIO information, data information pyramid. Well, what is information for? It's just like, oh my God. I mean, ideally, if we could reverse it, it'd be a chief technology officer and a chief data officer. That would be my, rewrite. But we get in our own way there as well, right? It's a CDO, then all of a sudden it was a CDAO, then it's now a CDAIOU, sometimes YO. It's like, enough already. We're trying to expand this when the rest of the organization is just, is trying to keep up. And that kind of consternation, I believe, confuses the people we're trying to deal with, because as important it is for data folks to be a CAIO versus a CDO, it's like, when does it stop? When do we sit down and like actually focus on doing the work rather than changing the labels?
Well, and the struggle with that, what I've seen thus far is, hey, I know we need to do this data stuff, and I know we need to do this AI stuff. CIO, you take it. It's like, wait a minute.
And that was always the case, right? The legacy. When I started in the business, we were calling on CIOs, and I think it was, to oversimplify it, data's in computers, and those people handle the system. So, and the development of, you look back at history, it was more focused on the system than the data.
Yes.
And the emergence of the CDO, I think, is one of the best things I've seen happen in the last decades, just as a role, just as a to highlight the importance of the content versus the mechanism that delivers the content
to achieve those outcomes.
Yeah. If you look at entertainment as an analog, TVs have gotten better technologically,
right?
But there's still people who handle whether the show is any good. And that's the data for me. That's the content. I can have the greatest TV in the world and the show sucks. I don't want to watch it. The special effects are nice. The producers, not, the actors are great. But all of that you could have all of that in $1 billion budget and still be a terrible movie because the story doesn't make sense. So that's the content. There's a lot of similarities between the development of entertainment content and the development of the data space that I see, which is always kind of fun to play with.
You've kind of danced around today how do we tell the story, right? Well, I mean, you've told it pretty well, but it comes back to sponsorship, right? I found that to be a huge differentiator for are you successful or not, is you have to have that senior stakeholder, you have to have sponsorship. In our particular case, we had a senior leader who was sprint to big data, let's go. And we had no resistance throughout the organization for the things that we wanted to implement. As soon as that leader retired and the next leader came in, they were a little more risk adverse. And man, it was like whack-a-mole after that. It was people popping up left and right. What are we spending that money on? Our data stewards aren't that important, right? And so why are you doing this? And we were constantly, instead of moving forward to implement an enterprise data management program, we were constantly just battling the closest alligators to the boat of people questioning why we're doing this at all. So, yeah.
And how do you get that sponsorship? You don't get it by them. It's very rare that they come from a space that understands the inherent nature and value of what we're trying to do as data folks. You got to tell the story.
It comes back to the story, right? I was just going to say, thinking along those lines, like, what are we doing to train future leaders on how to tell that story, right? Like, maybe that's where we should be focusing some of our energy in our professional development of our organization.
Agreed. To be great at data, you need to know the hard skills. Otherwise, you don't get there. But to be a great leader, you got to know the soft skills. Yeah. And it's ironic that, aside from soft skills being hard, also that data folks, to be good at what they do, to get the job they got, they don't necessarily have to bone up on these kinds of storytelling techniques and so on to, get started. But as you grow and develop, you find, all right, communicating back and forth with your peers, with your superiors, with sponsors, with customers, whatever is critical.
I mean, I would come back to Amazon as a great example. Early on, they established themselves as a technology company, and they said all data will be shared, and strong advocates of master data. Now they can kind of pivot and go do anything. Because they have that blocking and tackling, the foundation built. Hey, I'm going to start delivering my own stuff. Hey, I'm going to go start delivering pharmaceuticals. Hey, I'm going to start. I know my products. I know my users, my customers. I know locations. I know all of this information, and I share it freely across my organization. Hey, look, I can pretty much pivot and go do anything.
Think how quickly they can, build something. Sorry, Scott.
No, and think about, kind of the unsung hero of that capability, the ASIN, their product, their unique identifier for every product.
Right.
It's right on there. Anybody wants to look at it, it's right on every product page. Little ASIN there. I forget what it's Amazon single identifier number. I forget what it's called. They had to solve that problem because UPCs weren't big enough. I get real geeky about unique identifiers. That's where I spent my whole business career. DUNS number or a unique identifier product that I launched at Nielsen, or a unique location identifier that I brought at Nielsen. So all that stuff for me. And again, that is, that's the DNA of this, literally like the code around a lot of these capabilities that people don't realize.
one of your latest themes, I like it. It's very forward. Data is the new bullshit. Gen AI edition.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, first of all, it's been updated. It's now the Agentic AI edition with vibe coding. So I had to
Right.
I like
bring it up to date from 6 months ago. But it just speaks the whole thing. The subhead is as important as anything, which is why the way we talk about data is holding the industry back and what you can do about it. And it is my belief that much of the challenge and frustration we have is self-imposed because we don't explain it in a way that people can understand it. And it's as straightforward as that. Not all the problems are because of that, but a lot of them are. The kind of flow of that presentation, which is still using some of the same slides you probably saw in 2018, was developed there. I got a lot pithier. I worked a lot on delivery. I got some of the jokes down better. But the essence is the same, which is you've got to start at this stuff. And so I poke fun at a lot of the latest kind of buzzword things, which is always gets a good reaction, but then transition into you've got to be able to tell this story. And there's a whole piece around it's still the same story. So you don't have to learn a new story about AI. You just got to have, you just got different people playing the characters, but it's the same story. And if you go back, but use the current terminology. Back when I was starting, it was legacy systems, it was silos, it was, matching, those kinds of things that people were talking about. Now they're talking about semantic layers and knowledge graphs and ontology meshes. Where do you think that stuff comes from, right? What builds that? What makes that work at all? Or the incredible value we're going to get from unstructured data because it's this huge untapped insight that nobody ever thought of. Now we finally have the technology to do it. So it's data management, it's got, forget about all that stuff. We need that. Paraphrasing somebody's post in LinkedIn where they had this whole long white paper that I read most of because I scanned it about like data management's going away because we have LLMs that can handle unstructured data. And I've become just sort of a pro at this. I sort of scanned it and I got to the part where they were advocating the extensive use of tags and labels. Where the hell do you think those come from?
I was about to say the shift in that area has shifted from structured data to the metadata associated with semi and unstructured data. It's like, okay, well, you're still saying
metadata. There, but in a way that somebody cares because it's all related, right? It's all related. But this kind of hair splitting that goes on in our part of the world works against us in a lot of ways too. So that's kind of the theme of that session. And it was fun to kind of, as you suggested, go out bold with like data's the new bullshit. I sort of tested it a little bit because people get it like immediately, which is obviously play on what I believe was one of the worst analogies of the data space in the last couple of decades, which was data is the new oil.
Yeah.
And I watched people use it incorrectly. I watched people use some of it as a metaphor, some of it as a simile, some of it it's like, oh, well, data is like oil because you need to refine it to get value. But data is not like oil because it's not sustainable. You can't reuse it. It's like which side are you on and who cares? And unless you're in the oil business, it doesn't make sense to say that anyway. So it's been getting me all fired up again here because I was so defiant against it. I just hated it because I thought it was so ridiculously confusing. And the delivery of it in so many ways and so many times assume that people understand exactly what you mean by that.
Right.
It's funny because whoever came up with that term, at some point they probably saw all the variations and went, that isn't what I meant at all.
Yeah. John Humby originally way back, and apparently there's a couple of people who sort of claim credit for it. But and then people got cute. It's like, it's not the new oil, it's the new soil because you got to put it in there. Like, would you come up with soil if it didn't rhyme with oil? I don't think so. Meanwhile, it's 15 minutes into the meeting and nobody knows what anybody's talking about.
Right.
They're debating analogies, which are already a couple steps from the point. So all this is like, if you want to use analogies, a suggestion I have, and I have it in the book, is use your business as the analogy.
Make it tangible.
How you get data out of, value out of data. So if you're a healthcare company, it's like healthy business runs on healthy data. It's the lifeblood of our organization. If it's I worked with a shipping company to help them put their story together for data management internally. It was like let's use shipping as the analog. Everybody in this organization knows what shipping is and does and why it's important. And they know you move things from one place to another. They start somewhere, they have to get there. You have to track it. There's provenance, there's, lineage, there's all kinds of accountability. I heard a CDO of a water utility talk about how every user needs to know there's this refined, clean reservoir of data that goes through the pipes, that when you turn the spigot, you get trusted output. And they're like, okay, I'm in the water business. I can get that rather than
you can really grab onto those concepts.
So it's a friend of mine's a head of IT at SeaWorld, and he called his data program Data World.
There you go. I like it.
How hard's that? It's you're not putting it on
relatable.
You don't have to worry about it being some slow, but just boom. And he used the same kind of logos and typeface and whatever, and people just okay, got it. Because the purpose of all that kind of analogies, metaphors, poetry, as I like to call it, is to shorten the distance to understanding what you're talking about, not make it more complicated. That's
been the struggle for us. And again, we come at it from an AI perspective, but fully understanding and respecting the aspect that we're not getting anywhere without the data and good, clean data. That's the struggle we've had in telling the AI story as much as we do the data story. How do you make it tangible? And I love the fact that you're touching on these pieces because, and someone will say, give me some AI. Well, okay, what business outcome are you trying to achieve? And then pulling the thread back from there, and the AI story comes in, the data story comes in. How do I now create these capabilities that are going to culminate in some successful outcome?
One of my great hits slides, that I used a lot, that I still use today, that I came up with in the late 90s. So it was definitely in that 2018 show you saw. Is a display of one organization's 275 spelling configurations of, in this case, 7-Eleven. Came from a tobacco company that's not even under the same name anymore that I worked with in the 90s, where I looked at their call file of their local merchandisers that went out into stores to make sure, they have distributors and they have merchandisers in the tobacco business, and make sure signage was up and, detailing all the rest of it. And we just looked at this file and it was, 7 plus 11, 7/11, 7 spelled out, 11. I was just, come up with, and I still show it. And people are just like, yeah, that's
my problem. Yeah.
And my retort, when I realized, it's like, I've been using this slide for 30 years, which is great news because it's still effective, and which is terribly depressing because it still makes the point I've been trying to make for 30 years, and you still, get that point. But come up with that example too. So you could talk at very, to continue to answer one of your questions before, Heather, how do you explain this top level? One is to, yes, be very specific around kind of the general ways it enables what the company's trying to do, but then also show them why it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So if I show you, we can't spell Coca-Cola the same way twice in this organization. We've got our IBM. I mean, everybody has examples.
Yeah.
And, and that just goes, look, this might seem mundane to you. This might seem trivial. But this is clogging up the works. This is machines don't understand the differences there. And, AI as an Ozempic for data management is going to clear some of that stuff up, but not all of it.
I love the title though. Data is the new bullshit. If I were to go to a conference, on my next conference, if you're telling that one, I'm looking down the list. If I have Ben Stein, mundane on one session, and I see yours, I'm going to yours.
I'm trying to get butts and seats there. Yeah.
Invited back. Yeah.
It's been wonderful having you here. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, super. Yeah, great. No, this was fun. This was a fun conversation, especially folks who've sort of lived in the trenches as I have, dealing with very specific math data, reference data kinds of problems.
Yeah.
And I always find it really interesting to kind of look, and you've alluded to this, both of you, of, you go into an organization and you try and figure it out from a data perspective. And a lot of the work I had to do was training salespeople to know the clues to a master data story before they even went in.
Yeah.
There's some due diligence, but you look on somebody's website and, you know, they proudly declaim they've grown by merger and acquisition in the last 10
Mhm.
years. You're like, you know, throw me in the briar patch here. This thing's the best
Yeah.
inside.
Right. It's got to be.
No, it's, yeah, no way. And, you
Right.
know, we have these 9 divisions and these 12, you know, product lines, and we work in 100 countries. It's like,
It's
bring it
gotta
on. This is,
Yeah, that's your first assignment. Oh man.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, but pleasure talking to both of you. This was fun for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Scott. Thank you so much. And you know, what do you have coming up?
I'll be at Big Data London soon, which is one of my favorite shows all year. I'm doing the Data's New Bullshit on their VIP track, but I also have this whole content stream I've been playing with over the last couple of years called the Data Puppets.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Starring the CDO, the Chief Dog Officer, and the ITB who speaks only in buzzwords, and the Harry consultant from Meow Kinsey, and you know, it goes from there. And they're trying to deal with all the kind of common problems data speak I creatively, it's the most work I've ever done on anything, and it's the most satisfying. But my CEO/wife has said it's a business hobby. Okay, dear, you're not making. But I did do an actual paid engagement with the puppets, which was thrilling for this data
Cool.
observability brand, and we had to explain data observability, very digital situation with very analog tools, hand puppets, and I used ping pong balls as data, and I had tubes that were the pipelines, and the pipeline broke, and the ping pong balls fell, and they didn't know it. It was really a blast, and I have this whole series of multi-part episodes I'm putting out, not necessarily sequentially, but it'll all come together someday, under the title of Journey to the Center of the Single Version of the Truth, the greatest data story ever told. So look for that on YouTube and find me on LinkedIn almost every day. Keep going out there telling those stories.
Thanks, Scott. It's great to have you on. Hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thanks.